Hi, Lori and Joy and Amy and Lindsay and Terry. This is Greg Isbell, and I'm honored to be able to share a few thoughts about Bill. First of all, just want to tell you guys on behalf of all the Isbell family, we are grieving with you. We're rejoicing with Bill that he's home with Jesus, but in the meantime, the Lord said that blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. And I hope that today that there will be some comfort, and I know there will be some comfort coming from the Lord today for all of you. So I hopefully can share a few memories of the time that Bill and I spent together, since we both came up in equipping ministry together back in our greenhorn days when we were cultivating our pastoral callings and under Pastor Sonny. I will say it was one of the most joyful times of my life, and as a matter of fact, in honor of Bill, I normally wouldn't be wearing a coat, but I thought, what looks more like Bill than anything I've got wardrobe? My t-shirt, sweatshirts aren't going to do it. So I just remember Bill wearing his jackets, and so I do this in honor of Bill. Bill and I had a lot of fun together, as he did with everyone that knew him very well, especially behind the scenes when he was able to let his hair down, so to speak. He's one of the funniest people that I've ever known. We all know how full of joy he is. Well, one of the funny things that happened was when Bill and I were cultivating our prayer chops together at early morning prayer. We used to rotate opening up the building so that the people that wanted to pray could be there by 6 a.m. And many times Bill and I, or Bill or I, would show up together about the same time, scrambling for some coffee and getting there just in time to open up the building. And one day in particular, Bill looked exhausted. And I said, "What's going on, Bill?" And he said, "Well, I'm up all night, and I've just had some late night ministry going on and some study and some things going on. I just never really got to sleep, and boy, alarm kept going off. I was hitting the snooze button, and boy, it felt like I had an 800-pound demon sitting on my chest." And we all laughed because we got that picture. I mean, any of us that had been at early morning prayer had that feeling that, oh Lord, give me grace. You're going to have to raise me up because I just cannot get out of this bed without your power. And that's one way maybe that Bill learned to call on the power of God, is just to be able to get out of bed in those early mornings with only an hour or two of sleep. But I've used that 800-pound demon sitting on the chest illustration ever since, and that's been about 25 years. Speaking of that, I've been in ministry, equipping ministry, for about 35 years, and I will say I've had the pleasure of knowing dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of other pastors and associate pastors. But I can tell you this, that there is no other Bill Virgins out there. Most men have a calling that's either pastoral or a teacher or evangelist. But in all these years, I've never met anyone who was the perfect hybrid like Bill. Bill's heart for the lost was so sincere, so deep, it drove him to see people come to Jesus. And on the other hand, he had such a pastor's heart of love and of care and of nurturing. And I can tell you from experience, that is a very difficult balance between the two. I mean, I cannot say that I've ever walked in that balance very well. But Bill, more so than anyone I've ever known, was able to do that. It's just unbelievable that he could do those things throughout all those years. And of course, we know that that's the love of God that was in him and how he prayed. But he was very concerned about the lost and the people of God. And it was exemplary for me. He was an inspiration in about 1,000 ways, but that was one way that I tell people about Bill that never met him. I said, you should have seen how he was, how he loved the lost, and how yet he still took time, no matter what the ages was, no matter how old you were, no matter where you're from. Bill just exuded the love of God and a passion for the calling on his life. And of course, we know that he would attribute that to his relationship with Jesus and those hours of prayer that he spent. And I would say also that behind the scenes, some funny things happened. One time in particular, Bill and I went to we went to Mardi Gras together. He finally talked me into it. I was a little bit more shy about doing evangelism, and I had been to Bourbon Street one other time in my life, but it wasn't because I was trying to help the lost. It was because I was lost. And it was a whole different atmosphere when I went with Bill Virgin and the crew this time. And of course, it was radical. We were sleeping on the concrete floors in a locker room somewhere, and we were getting up, we were praying, and then we were just going for it out on the streets, Bourbon Street and Mardi Gras. But one time in particular, Bill and I were walking together with a couple other guys. We went down in literally the darkest, most dangerous areas of Bourbon Street, and we had some things happen that were pretty funny. And it was when Bill was ministering to a guy, trying to tell him about Jesus, and this guy was just a natural comedian, and he got us laughing so hard that we could barely recuperate. But Bill overcame, and he ministered Jesus and the love of God and the gospel to that guy. And all through that trip, just being with Bill, we flew on the plane together down there, and we really were brothers. You know, when you've had that kind of bonding with guys, you know, you just carry them around for the rest of your life. And even though both of us have been so busy through the years, being senior pastors now and all the things that involves, we hardly ever get to see each other. But whenever we do, we always laugh nonstop and recount some of those things that happen. I don't know if all of you know this, but when Stevie Ray Vaughan went on to be with the Lord, Pastor Sonny was unexpectedly called to do his funeral. And of course, Bill was raised in Idaho in the mountains, and he really didn't know a lot about the music industry. And don't think Pastor Sonny did very much either, although Stevie Ray Vaughan was an Oak Cliff boy like Pastor Sonny, and went to school separately, I think. But we didn't know what we were getting into that day, and there were celebrities, great musicians from all over that came that day. And Bill and I were sitting together as Pastor Sonny was about to preach the funeral for Stevie Ray Vaughan, the icon. And we looked over to our left, and there was Stevie Wonder. And Stevie Wonder was going to come and sing the Lord's Prayer. And it was ethereal. We couldn't believe it, that we're sitting here right next to Stevie Wonder. He was over to my left. And when Pastor Sonny called him up to sing, he came walking with his cane and right past me. And Bill, as was his habit with me, wanted to make me laugh. And it was a gift that he had. But it was also a great test to how much I could keep my composure. And Bill stuck his leg out where no one else could see but me, right before Stevie Wonder walked by. And I can tell you that was maybe the hardest minute of my life, while celebrities all over America were staring at me as I was red as a ketchup bottle, trying to keep from laughing right in the middle of the funeral service. And nowadays, some people may think that was inappropriate. It was, but it was one of the funniest things that Bill ever did. And of course, we were young men at the time. I know he would never do anything like that again. Bill was very serious about Jesus, and he was very serious about God. And back in the day, there was a thing going around called the Laughing Revival. And in the Laughing Revival, there was a man that would go in the large churches and actually would fill them up, and he would go around and he would preach a message, and then pray for people that they might get an infilling of joy and laughter. And so Bill and Laurie and my wife Carrie and I rode together about 50 miles to go to this revival to see if the Lord would touch us with joy in such a way that we would get this laughing gift. Well, when the time came, there was about 4,000 to 5,000 people in the congregation, and so he asked for those that wanted to get the gift to line up side by side, which we all did, and there was probably about 1,000 people in that auditorium that lined up, and just like a serpentine belt, it was weaving in and out of the aisles and through people. And Bill and I decided we want to get that touch. So we went up, and as our wives were left behind, I think, watching the kids, we went up and stood together. Actually, there was one person in between us, and we were waiting to get that touch as the speaker went through the line, touching heads to impart the feeling of laughter. And he started way on the other side of the auditorium and was rapidly coming by, and every time he touched someone, they would fall backwards and they would fall down. I'm not talking about some people, I'm talking about every single person. And they had teams of people behind them, catchers, to catch the people that got the gift. And we looked to the left, and we were being very serious and very reverent. And Bill and I had decided that we didn't want anything artificial. We didn't want to give a courtesy drop. That we wanted to make sure that if the Lord wanted us to have this gift of joy and of laughter, then nobody was going to push us down. We were going to stand there, and only the power of God itself could make us fall down. But we were ready to receive. And the closer and closer they got, we could hear the preacher coming by, laying hands, and people were literally dropping like bowling pins, one after another, hundreds and hundreds, and they got closer and closer and closer, and it suddenly came upon me, and he hit me on the head, and the person next to me, I could hear, hit him on the head, and they fell, and he went on down the line, and I was still standing there, and I was looking to my left, and there was no one standing in the auditorium except me to my left, and I knew the person beside me had fallen down, and I looked to my right, and there was Bill standing up just like me, and everybody to Bill's right had fallen down, and they were laughing all over the auditorium. People were laughing, and every single bowling pin fell down except Bill and I. And we stood there like goalposts on a football field, and I looked at Bill, and Bill looked at me, and he said, "Oh God, we're sinners." And of course we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, and I've laughed through the years about that. You know what I finally decided? We didn't need a laughing revival. We already had it. Both of us had been filled with joy and the laughter that the Lord wanted us to have, especially when we got together. And so, precious memories. Another time I just wanted to share, and I hope that you guys get to edit this. If not, there was a time that Bill was so busy that it was just unbelievable. As a matter of fact, I actually wrote down the conversation that he and I had one time, and so I'm going to read that so I get it right. But he took the saying very seriously that we're to pray like everything depends on us, but work. No, let me just do that right this time. That we are to pray like everything depends on God, but to work like everything depends on us. And that literally described Bill. He was unbelievable. He had such a great work ethic, and he was just relentless. And nobody could keep up with Bill on a project or anything except some of the guys that he was discipling. So one day, honestly, a lot of times I just had to keep my distance from Bill because he made me look bad. And so I came up to him one time and I said, "Bill, what do you got to do today?" And So he said, well, you know, after 2 hours of prayer, 2 more hours of prayer, I'm going to bust up some concrete at the Rockatorium, and then I'm going to visit a youth up at the high school and have lunch with him. Except I'm not eating, I'm fasting, but I'm going to be there just to cultivate that relationship. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and meet with my youth prayer leaders, and my youth leaders, we're going to have a prayer meeting together about tonight at the Rockatorium, the youth meeting we're having. And then after that, I'm going to go and I'm going to study for about 2 hours for my message. And then, well, after that, I'm going to plan some with some community leaders about an outreach and a crusade we're doing up at the high school stadium. And then after that, I'm going to go home and I'm going to build an addition at the house for Laurie and the girls, and then probably mow the yard after that. And then going to try to go back up to the Rockatorium and pray some more before the meeting. What are you doing, Greg? Well, I said, yeah, Bill, I'm supposed to make the announcements in church in a couple of weeks, and so I'm probably going to go meet with the Lord and get ready for that. I'll see you in a couple of weeks, Bill. He was one of a kind. I loved him with all my heart. And I love you guys too, Laurie, and the kids. You know what? He was one of the greatest men I've ever known. I know you all agree. Lord bless you. I hope we can see you soon. Bye-bye.